Need your daily fix on mixed martial arts?
We're going to kind of recap Bellator 155.
From UFC 198.
Who's who?
Kind of a controversial decision.
And who's not?
I couldn't figure out why, and then it hit me.
Well, don't you fret, because Golden State Media Concepts got you covered. Get your daily dose of MMA podcasts. Everything from the UFC, Bellator Fighting Championships, Extreme Cage Fighting, Invicta Fighting Championships, and so much more. Join us as we talk about some of the biggest names in mixed martial arts. We've got you covered here on Golden State Media Concepts MMA Podcast.
Thank you for tuning into the GSMC MMA Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Arnel De Leon, and I will say it again, like I've always been saying it. I hope you are doing good for yourself. You are healthy, your friends, your family, you are all healthy during a very uncertain time period, whether you live in the States or internationally. I want to be sure that you are doing perfectly fine for yourself and you're healthy. And you know what? One thing that's certainly not healthy right now would be the UFC, because a fighter hasn't pulled out. Initially, when talking about UFC for the May 9th event, though, we're still unsure whether that event will be a UFC numbered event, or it's going to be a Fight Night event or ESPN event. There's a lot of expectations and excitement going on for the fight card, as Amanda Nunes was going to fight against Felicia Spencer. We had a batch of title fights happening. We got multiple Fight of the Night contenders here. But now we're getting new news here. This coming in from CBSSports.com, that UFC 2 division champion Amanda Nunes won't fight on May 9 and wants a full training camp for Felicia Spencer. The Lioness thinks that fighting in a few weeks is too soon given the coronavirus pandemic. Regardless of whether UFC President Dana White can pull off a potential supercard on May 9 at a location that is yet to be determined, 2-division champion Amanda Nunes said she won't be part of it. Nunes, 19-4, who verbally agreed to a spring defense of her UFC women's featherweight title opponent, Felicia Spencer, told CBS Sports on Monday that May 9 is too soon, despite recent reports linking her to the card. In a recent interview, she goes on to say, "Actually, I'm not fighting May 9, Nunes said. I'm going to fight, but I don't know yet. I don't think this is the right time for me right now. Let this coronavirus pass a little bit so I can at least have a full camp. We can maybe see around June, but let's see what's going to happen. But I'm not fighting May 9. And then it goes on to say that 31-year-old Amanda Nunes has stayed busy during the global pandemic by promoting her role in the new Quibi show, Iron Sharpens Iron, opposite U.S. soccer star Carly Lloyd, launching on April 20. The show is the brainchild of executive producer Cam Newton and pair-star athletes from different sports to trade secrets of their individual training programs and mental preparation. Nunes, a native of Brazil, said she has been allowed to train at her home gym, American Top Team, in Coconut Creek, Florida, on a daily basis, because while observing social distance, while she's trying to push towards social distancing. The gym opened just for people that has fights coming up, Nunes said. It's not many people, it's me and a couple guys that are going to be on the same card as me. We all have separate training with just me and my coach, one-on-one. I keep in shape like that. I go to the gym only one time in the morning and do everything. I do a couple of things myself and some things that I need a coach. Then I come home and I really do everything I can to keep in shape. I have a treadmill and some weights. Felicia Spencer, 29, is fresh off her victory, TKO victory over Zara Ferrin dos Santos, and has lost just one pro fight, a 2019 decision, to former 145-pound champion Chris Cyborg Justino, in which the native Montreal showcased her toughness. And I can tell you right now that probably was the second toughest fight Chris Cyborg had during her runtime in the UFC. So it was against Amanda Nunes and against Felicia Spencer. So when you read up the news that, Cyborg, she defeated Felicia Spencer, well, it wasn't as one-sided as it was. When watching the fight, yes, it was sort of one-sided, but I felt like in her second fight against Dos Santos, I really felt like Felicia Spencer has made some adjustments to her game that I really do believe if Spencer were to fight against Chris Cyborg, I can see Spencer do a lot more better of a job. The interviewer goes on to say that I like this matchup a lot. Nunes said, "I like to fight girls like her. Tough, wants to fight all the time. She's not a running fighter. She's really going to bring that, and I love it. That brings out the best in me." This coming in from Brian Campbell, CBS Sports Insider. So what does this mean for the UFC? Well, it's sad to know that that a major fight that could be fight of the night here, considering the fact that Willie Zhang had an amazing performance against Iwan Jacek. I thought to myself that a 2-division champion like Amanda Nunes would go on to fight against Spencer, so she can continue to push her legacy as the greatest women's champion of all time. But now Amanda Nunes is saying that she doesn't want to fight against Felicia Spencer because she wants to be fully prepped up for it. And from my perspective, I completely understand where she's coming from here. If you are prepping up for, like, I'm looking at this fight, and Felicia Spencer, even though Amanda Nunes is coming to this fight as the major easy favorite for this fight, don't count on Spencer. Spencer is very tough, and I wouldn't mind. And considering the fact how Amanda Nunes, how she handles herself during pressure situations against a fighter like Germaine Duraname, which was Nunes' last fight, I could see someone like Spencer be able to take the brunt of Amanda Nunes striking, and will be able to fend her off within through all 5 rounds. I can see Spencer. I don't see Spencer being knocked out. For as strong as Amanda Nunes is, with the way on how her performance was against Duraname, and with how Spencer was able to last long against Cyborg and Dos Santos, I can see Felicia Spencer go 5 rounds against Nunes. And when prepping up for a 5-round fight, I understand that Amanda Nunes is like, okay, I'm going to fight against this really tough opponent who I can see myself losing to. I can see someone being really tough to knock out and compete against for 5 rounds. So you know what? I want to dedicate as much time as I can into training camp. It's completely understandable if some fighters are not comfortable with this. Fighters who are currently champions, and fighters who are challengers, like, their mentality behind pushing for a fight is very different. If you're a champ, I remember Cain Velasquez, even though he went through a lot of injuries, he was also very hesitant when it comes to going for certain fights. When you're a champion, when you're Kamaru Usman, even when Tyron Woodley was a champion, he was very hesitant on fighting against Wonderboy Stephen Thompson, because if he were to have a title fight, it would have to mean a lot for him, and there has to be a lot in stake for that fight. And so for Amanda Nunes to say, hey, I know that if I fight against Felicia Spencer here and I'm not fighting at 100%, I can see myself losing this fight, and I don't want to risk all the money and all the glory that comes by losing the belt. So yeah, I understand Amanda Nunes' perspective here, but one thing that I am very worried about would be the fact that she's expecting the whole coronavirus pandemic to end around June. And with the way how things are going here, with the way how things are going right now currently in the States, although Florida, how it handles the coronavirus issue is a lot more different than a whole lot of the other states. I currently live in California, and California has to be one of the more strict. It's one of the more strict, one of the more restrictive, but yet also the most progressive state out there in California. And California is very hesitant, and we got representatives who represent our California government here who say that, oh wow, the coronavirus issue can last around even August. But some people speculate it can even last up to a year. We can go a full year of people not working, people staying at home, social distancing. It's a very complicated time right now. And although, yeah, a lot of money is being invested towards finding help to go find a cure, to go fight off against coronavirus right now, we are uncertain when everything will go back to business and everything will be normal again. It's a very complicated time right now. And so for someone like Amanda Nunes, I understand how it might be difficult for her to prep up against a fighter considering the situation that's happening here. But really, if Amanda Nunes were to decline this fight against Felicia Spencer, we don't know when Nunes is going to fight again. We really don't. We don't know if Nunes will be able to fight in all of 2020. Because let's say, so she's saying June. It's speculated by many sources that everything could go back to business by around maybe late July or mid-August. So let's say the coronavirus social distancing issue and businesses going back to normal again by mid-August. All right, then from that point on, Amanda Nunes then has to dedicate 3-4 months of prepping and training time for Felicia Spencer. So from August, so then she might fight like in December 2020, pretty much the last month, and that's with the notion that Felicia Spencer isn't going to fight someone else. If Spencer were to fight against another opponent, because Spencer's a challenger, she's not afraid to go. She's got almost like nothing really to risk other than her contendership right now. But considering the fact that she's defeated everybody who is a comparable opponent to her in the featherweight women's division, I can see Spencer hold on her ground and beat somebody. And then if she beats somebody and then she goes through an injury, then Nunes doesn't have anyone to face. She's going to fight against a much more weaker opponent in the division, and that's not best for Amanda Nunes' legacy. And I would like to see Nunes fight against Spencer, but I get why she would not want to. She wants to be fully prepped up, and at this very moment, there are a lot of fighters who are all of a sudden, hey, you got to fight for this card, you want to make some extra money, and that's how things are. And so after the break, we'll be discussing some more MMA news right here at the GSMC MMA Podcast.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
And welcome back. So this is coming in from yahoosports.com that UFC welterweight Lyman Good says he pulled out of UFC 249 after testing positive for coronavirus. So it is noted here from Ariel Helwani, to which he did an interview with Lyman Good here, that UFC welterweight Lyman Good tested positive for COVID-19. He's the first active UFC fighter to publicly reveal he had coronavirus. He was supposed to fight at UFC 249, but was forced to withdraw. Thanks to Lyman Good at MMA for sharing his story. And he goes on to do an interview with Ariel Helwani, to which he goes over his process. Good was initially supposed to face Bel Muhammad at UFC 249 on April 18, which was, at the time of this recording, 2 days ago, but was reported to be scratched with an undisclosed injury 2 weeks before the event was scheduled. That injury turned out to be a case of COVID-19. Good said he took precautions against the virus while training for UFC 249, limiting his training to only certain people in the gym. His symptoms were described as significant fatigue, but no cough. He recalled having labored breathing after a training session, but thought it wasn't too unusual. After a particularly rough day, he and his girlfriend both got tested and found out they were positive. Good said he informed everyone he had contact with and the UFC of his diagnosis, and mentioned he received a call of support from UFC President Dana White. Dana White had been pushing to still hold UFC 249 despite the pandemic, attempting to circumvent the event mandates and hold the event on a California tribal land. The event was eventually axed until broadcast partner ESPN stepped in. Despite his diagnosis, Good said he was grateful for the UFC's attempt to hold events amid the coronavirus. There's a lot of negative, a lot of fear, and a lot of bad circulating around in the world and in the media. Good said, maybe this would be a good distraction if any of those who are criticizing the UFC had the opportunity to make money. You're going to tell me they're going to say no? They're not going to try to make money and bring fruit to the table? The 34-year-old Good has previously held the Bellator Welterweight Championship and joined the UFC in 2015. So it's good to know that Dana White, for as much as he comes across as a type of person who's very aggressive and always he has a tendency of insulting his own fighters. I think there was a quote that says here that he doesn't like fighters being businessmen because they're not businessmen at all. I don't think Dana White sees his own fighters as business people. I think he just sees them as, you're my workers and I gotta go take care of you guys. So this is also coming in from TMZ.com that ex-UFC fighter shout out from Dana White battling COVID-19 as nurse in New York City. So the front cover here is the fighter Philip Nover talking with Dana White via FaceTime. And so ex-UFC fighter Philip Nover is now a registered nurse helping patients during the COVID-19 pandemic, and he just got a video message from Dana White praising him for his efforts. Hearing all the incredible things you're doing on the front lines of New York City, White said, "You're awesome, kid." Some backstory, the 36-year-old Nover first began fighting the UFC in 2008 and took fights in the octagon all the way up to 2017. He's 11-8-1 as a pro, but he's now an RN working at a hospital in Brooklyn, where he's part of a rapid response team treating coronavirus patients. When Dana White found out about Nova's story, he sent a video to us that we could play for him, and it's pretty great. This is coming from an interview. I have so much respect for not just you, but for everybody who is part of the first responders and the medical staff that are taking care of everybody and putting yourself in harm's way to help others. You were a stud on The Ultimate Fighter, and apparently you're still kicking butt. My friend, congratulations. Thank you so much for all you're doing for everybody. Nova was blown away by the message, telling us that's awesome. Thanks, Dana. Nova also explained why it's so important to him to pitch in during the pandemic, explaining, I'm glad I can actually help out. There's more. Nova tells us why he's gone to nursing and why he feels his experience as a fighter helps him in his new career. So he goes on to do an interview with TMZ detailing over his career of becoming now a registered nurse. So he goes on to say here, at this point, I think my fight is in the hospital, and that's really nice. It's really nice to see. I always enjoy it when there are fighters who have the second life going on beyond just mixed martial arts. I do think there are some fighters that only think about. Okay, so here's the thing. So as it is being reported on by TMZ here, that there's a fighter who's moved on from mixed martial arts and is moving towards medicine. We got another fighter here in BJ Penn. So BJ Penn goes on to talk about how he did an interview where he's saying that he misses mixed martial arts, and that's the only thing that's going on in his life. So while Nova here is being like, you know what? Yeah, I was an MMA fighter, but I want to move on to something else. My next passion here is being a nurse. Coming in from BloodyElbow.com here, BJ Penn goes on to say that fighting is the only thing I have going on in my life right now. So while Philip Nora here is trying to make the next step of being... I feel like BJ Penn comes from a different period of time when it comes to mixed martial arts here. Yes, he came a lot earlier. He came from the 90s. He came several years before Nova came into UFC. And so I think I remember a video that came out from MMA on Point. And in the video, the title was like 10 things I would miss from 90s mixed martial arts. And in the video, the speaker goes on to say that an aspect of the fight game he will miss would be the very like meatheady, very old schoolish, I'm gonna go fight anybody kind of style. The style for like Nick and Nate Diaz kind of person is like, you know what? I'm a fighter. This is the only thing I'm good at. I'm gonna focus on this thing in my life because that's who I am. That type of fighter. And it's very nice. And I love so during that time frame. Even though like people like Tank Abbott and like Ken Shamrock were the poster child of 90s UFC, one fighter that they were really proud of as they transitioned from the 90s into the 2000s was Rich Franklin. And the reason why was because Rich Franklin, unlike these other fighters, unlike fighters like Chuck Liddell and Tito Ortiz, had other stuff happening in their lives. Like, he was also a math teacher, so he was a math teacher, and also he was an MMA fighter. We had, there's one fighter, I forgot his name, who was doing real estate, and MMA fighting. There was one fighter who made, a series of YouTube videos detailing about how much money he made fighting for the UFC. So even though the UFC is this really large organization, the largest MMA organization in the world, and also him fighting through the undercard, and at one point in the main card, landed him about $20,000 over the course of a year. And I thought, wow, $20,000, that's awful. Like, I have friends in the Silicon Valley who are a lot more younger and are not in a huge risk in their work environment compared to these fighters who make a lot more money, doing a job. I guess like engineering is a difficult job. I'm not saying like every job is difficult to an extent, but they're doing a job that's a lot more safe than it is, training to be a fighter. You're putting money into a training camp, and you're going to go out there, and there's a chance out there that your brain can be scrambled, or you could walk away from the fight with your body all messed up. MMA fighting is very dangerous, and so it's happy to know when there's a fighter out there who's doing something else beyond just being a fighter. There's nothing wrong just being a fighter, but unless you're like, the Conor McGregors of the world here, where you can go make a whole lot of money being an MMA fighter, being an established superstar, being an established star in the world of mixed martial arts here. For the most part, a lot of fighters are not like that. Even Don Cerrone. I got friends who make a lot more money and put a lot less effort into their work than a person like Don Cerrone. And Don Cerrone is one of the biggest stars out there in the world. And so I'm thinking here, you know what? I'm happy for this guy. He's doing something else beyond just mixed martial arts. He's got a career. And that's something that I will not miss from 90s mixed martial arts and a little bit of early 2000s mixed martial arts. And it's that it's beginning to grow onto fighters are increasingly trying to be businessmen, and that's something that I kind of disagree with Dana White here. Dana White, for the most part, even though he takes care of his fighters and he praises fighters a lot when it's needed, like him praising this man here for being a nurse, he identifies his fighters as just fighters for the most part then, and he should tell these fighters, hey, letting you know right now that the UFC and mixed martial arts, it's very different, it's very dangerous, and it's not guaranteed on what money you will make from working in this company here. I say you should go have a second job or an alternative career. He did that with Sage Northcutt, where he's like, hey Sage, you're not really cut out for mixed martial arts, man. You have a lot of potential in other aspects of your life. Go to college and make something out of yourself, because mixed martial arts isn't the only thing in the world. Sage Northcutt took that kind of an insult, but I agree with Dana White, and I think a lot more fighters should follow that kind of trend. So coming up right after the break here, we'll be covering some more MMA news here, starting off with BJ Penn. We'll be back after the short break.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
And we are back. So I said this before, but I'm going to reiterate it again here, but it's coming in from BloodyElbow.com that BJ Penn goes on to say, fighting is the only thing I have going on in my life. And you kind of have to feel sad for BJ Penn here. He says, if I could get anything else going in life than just a fist fight, it would be nice. UFC legend BJ Penn is finding it difficult to retire and commit to a life beyond MMA. Although the prodigy knows his top prize fighting days are behind him, the 41-year-old is non-committal on retirement because MMA is the only thing he was going on in his life right now, per a recent Instagram live session with Coach Jason Perillo. It takes a lot of work. It takes too much. Penn says, too much effing work. At this age, it just takes too much effing work. You never know what's going to happen, but it takes so much work. If I can get anything else going on, it would be nice. If I could get anything else going in life than just a fist fight, it would be nice. But it's so fun, and I love the process and all those things about it. Then you get in the gym and start doing good with active fighters, and next thing you know, you're trying to fight and biting off more than you can chew. You might be, but the process itself, it's a lot. Just do a camp or whatever. I guess when you have something to prove, that's when you can fight the best. Penn said, it's like, hey man, you already proved yourself. It's not about proving yourself. I just really like doing this, but you can't go out and keep getting hurt. That just doesn't make any sense to anybody. Penn hasn't fought since his decision loss against Clay Guida at UFC 237. The Hawaiian is 0-7 in his last 7 fights and hasn't won a fight since his first round knockout of Matt Hughes in 2010. Despite his less than stellar record of 16-40-2, Penn is still considered one of the best fighters of all time, having won belts in 2 separate weight classes and becoming the first ever UFC lightweight and welterweight champion. The UFC Hall of Famer holds notable victories over Matt Hughes, Diego Sanchez, Kenny Florian, Matt Serra, Sean Shirk, and Takanori Gomi. So BJ Penn is going on about how it's hard for him to move on to the next aspect of his life here. He's 41 years old. The last time he won a fight was 2010. 10 years ago! It's ridiculous. Last time he won a fight was 10 years ago, and he still believes, hey, I kind of have something to prove here. But at the same time, he's kind of self-aware of himself. The way how I look at BJ Penn right now seems like it seems like kind of an addict. That's how I'm placing it right now for BJ Penn here. BJ Penn seems like the type of person that doesn't know when to quit, and I'm putting that in a negative light there. And the fact that even he's aware of it. Even he's aware that it logically doesn't make any sense for BJ Penn to continue fighting, even to consider the fact that he's got nothing else to prove. He is, I say, the greatest lightweight champion in the history of the UFC, without a doubt. He is the greatest. Second greatest, Khabib Nurmagomedov. And with the way how Khabib Nurmagomedov's career trajectory is going so far, if Khabib, I think, were to have 2 more victories, if Khabib were to have 2 or 3 more victories, then he would surpass BJ Penn in both total cumulative days as lightweight champion and also most title defenses. And then I wouldn't be surprised within the span of the next year, within the same time next year, 2021, we'll be like, you know what, Khabib Nurmagomedov is officially the greatest lightweight champion of all time, which will then move BJ Penn back just a little bit. Consider the fact that BJ Penn is pretty active on social media for the most part here. He's always talking. He's always conjuring up ideas or thinking about, hey, what's the next aspect of my career? And when I think about him talking about his career, I'm thinking of a Chuck Liddell situation here. You guys remember when Chuck Liddell fought against Tito Ortiz that last time? It was sad. It looked like we saw a broken man who had no place fighting in an octagon, who was well beyond his prime, and it's in terms of health, he shouldn't try to fight. Like, Chuck Liddell had no place fighting against Tito Ortiz. It was over for him. And so while there are some fighters there who are old, like Tito Ortiz, I still think can perform at a very high level at this point, though. But we then look at fighters like Rampage Jackson and King Mo, fighters who age over time, and they just don't. And even like fighters like Chael Sonnen and Lyoto Machida and Mauricio Shogunua, and Ovince St. Preux. The older you get here, you don't become better. Like Daniel Cormier. Daniel Cormier is older than BJ Penn, and Daniel Cormier is one of the best fighters ever right now. Daniel Cormier could destroy a lot of people who are much more younger than him in the light heavyweight and heavyweight division. But and it's not an insult. It's not a bad thing to say, yeah, I'm younger than Daniel Cormier, and I'm not as good as a fighter as him, and I don't have the longevity that Cormier has. No, here, Cormier hasn't participated in mixed martial arts as long as BJ Penn. So yes, Cormier is fighting at a high level at an older age than BJ Penn. BJ Penn has been doing this for a very, very long time. Yes, Cormier has done some wrestling dating back to the 90s, but BJ Penn has been doing mixed martial arts against very top tier, high tier fighters throughout the entire world since the 90s. So yeah, BJ Penn, I would like to see BJ Penn move on to a different aspect of his life. We were talking about how Dana White was praising how a fighter moved on to a career as a nurse. People always talk about how great it is that Stipe Miocic is not just a fighter, he's also a firefighter also. He fights fires and also he fights in the octagon. That's really great for him. Rich Franklin is, whenever someone talks about Rich Franklin, he's always placed in a very high pedestal because he was one of the initial early on, like, okay, so this guy is not just a fighter. He's also a math teacher. This guy is not just a fighter. He's not just a meathead fighter who just likes to go punch people. This guy fights strategically, he fights smart, and also he's a college graduate. He has smart IQ. Overall, Rich Franklin seems like that normal, ordinary guy who just so happens to be a great fighter. So when I see Dana White praising like his fighters who have secondary parts to their careers, I think Dana White doesn't see BJ Penn the same way. I think Dana White and a whole lot of people see BJ Penn as Old Yeller for the most part. There was a movie called The Wrestler, and in the movie called The Wrestler that stars Mickey Rourke and won a bunch of awards. And the story is about a guy, Mickey Rourke, like, in that he doesn't really care about winning his pro wrestling matches. He doesn't care about the popularity. He doesn't care about the fame. He doesn't care about the injury. All he cares is that rush of going out there. You see a large crowd. They're all cheering for you. It's one, I think for BJ Penn, it's sort of like Mickey Rourke in The Wrestler. It's sort of like that. And also along with BJ Penn, finding like some enjoyment off the physical attrition that does happen in mixed martial arts. So even though I myself don't do amateur boxing anymore, and I don't do mixed martial arts, there is like an element of fun and enjoyment and like a thrill when you do get punched. So when I was doing boxing with my brother and some people, I know it sounds weird here. It just really sounds weird. It's not a good thing to be punched in the face. It's not. It's not good to get hit with the right haymaker so hard your legs start wobbling, you start being all disoriented, and you kind of want to fall to the ground. It's really bad when someone hits you with a liver shot and you're holding on to your upper torso and you're slowly walking away. It feels really bad. It does. But at the same time, you get like some weird rush or enjoyment out of it. It's the same like weird, like my theory on this actually is that whenever you see a fighter, like when there's like a major shot that happened, like a liver punch or a hard hit, you see the fighter kind of smile a wee bit. They're kind of smiling because they're trying to hide how much pain they're going through. But it's also like this weird like defense mechanism for themselves when they like when they're feeling something that they shouldn't feel that is negative to them, but a small part of them kind of enjoys it. What do I expect BJ Penn in the near future? I don't expect anything. I think it's awful if an MMA organization tries to push for a BJ Penn fight. I think BJ Penn should go, I don't know, go back to college or try to find an alternative career, go to church. He has to find something other than mixed martial arts. He has to do something else. And it really shouldn't be difficult, really. Like in 2020 right now, when everybody is trying to be good at a little bit of everything at this point, when it's not that hard or difficult for you to develop multiple skills or how to find a group that's going to enjoy hobbies, it's not that difficult to find interests, considering the fact that we have the internet nowadays, and finding interest is as easy as having a simple click in the button. So, BJ Penn, I hope things go well for you, but I just don't see him going back to mixed martial arts as an actual professional fighter. I can see him as a coach, but as a fighter, no. You're listening to the GSMC MMA podcast, coming back right after the short break.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
So let's talk about something a little bit more positive here, and that is with Francis Ngannou. So just a year ago, Francis Ngannou was in a downturn of his career. He had so much hype coming in for Francis Ngannou. A lot of people were heralding him as the next big thing, the next big superstar that should be the centerpiece of the heavyweight division. I remember when he fought against Stipe Miocic, the general consensus was that Stipe Miocic was the better fighter than Ngannou, but Ngannou had so much star power coming in him. Like, Francis Ngannou can be the face of your organization. I don't see why Stipe Miocic can't. But a lot of people thought, hey, Francis Ngannou, he has a chance to be the face, the next big thing for the UFC, for mixed martial arts, and and it'd be better financially and in terms of business if he were to go and defeat Stipe Miocic. The way how people looked at Francis Ngannou was somewhat similar to how people looked at Sage Northcutt and Paige Van Zandt. And that if Paige Van Zandt or Sage Northcutt were to become UFC champions, then talk about PR heaven. It really would be like, yes, we got the fighters that are nice, that are attractive looking, and are going to attract themselves a large, gigantic audience. They are active in social media. They're young. This is what we need for the UFC. That was Ngannou at one period in time here, but it's coming in from MMAJunkie.com that Coach Eric Nixick discusses the evolution of Francis Ngannou's striking game. So there's a video here, you guys can still look for yourself here, but Francis Ngannou's coach and general manager of Extreme Couture, Eric Nixick, says the UFC heavyweight contender is getting sharper and more refined as a striker as the pair continue to train together for the Cameroonian's octagon return. Nixick has been spending plenty of one-on-one time with Ngannou, who is 14-3 in MMA and 19-2 in the UFC. In preparation for his upcoming fight with Rosenstrike, which is now set for May 9, and the pair, I have been able to conduct a regular one-on-one sessions with Ngannou, hitting pads with his head coach. Despite the unusual training circumstances in a rather empty gym, Nixick has enjoyed his training camp with Ngannou and has seen massive strides in his striking. I kind of liked it, to be honest with you. Nixick told MMA Junkie, "It's a change of pace, and I like throwing wrenches into things and adapting to the way of the environment is now." I think that implements what we are in the fight game. You have to adapt on the fly, and you have to accept change. And I welcome that. Yes, it's a challenge. We still have to go fight, but at the end of the day, me and him are committed to each other, and we want to make sure that we're going to put out the very best product. He's super accurate. I think that's one thing too, that he's been working on a lot with his coach, Dewey Cooper, and myself. And he's accurate, and he's pinpoint. He's not overthrowing his punches. Maybe like once was, like sitting down everything. His technique is impeccable, but he sits like a truck. He's one of the hardest kickers and one of the hardest punches I've ever held for. So my shoulders and my body is definitely going to be happy when this camp is over. It's a scary thing to think about, considering that Ngannou has shut out the lights of almost everyone he's faced, and is coming off 3 straight first round finishes over Curtis Blades, Cain Velasquez, and Junior Dos Santos. His fight with Rosenstrike will most likely determine the next UFC heavyweight title challenger, and Ngannou is looking to secure his second shot at gold. If Nixick's assessment is right, he'll be much better prepared for the second time around. So, Francis Ngannou is prepping up against another title fight against Stipe Miocic right now, and with the way how things are going on for Ngannou, Francis Ngannou is making all the right steps. He's making all the right steps to being the good, complete fighter here, because every time Ngannou steps into a fight, he's always physically the better. He's always like physically and athletic wise the superior fighter. Genetically speaking, Francis Ngannou, if you were to say, hey, Francis Ngannou were to have like those punching bag contests, like, you know the contest where there's like a bag in the middle and you got to punch as hard as you can, and there's a number. It's like, yeah, you got like number like 999. You are the most hardest hitting puncher out there. If Ngannou were to have a contest, like a strongman contest, against every fighter in the heavyweight division, he would easily destroy everyone, without a doubt. He would defeat everybody in terms of pound for pound hardest hitters in the entire division, and even in the entire UFC. And that was both a good thing, and it was a good thing and a bad thing for Ngannou, because Ngannou was destroying so many people with his sheer punching power. His technique, Ngannou has always had technique though, but he mostly was reliant on the fact of his power. He was never the strongest counterpuncher. I'm saying this now, even though he knocked out Alistair Overeem with a counter uppercut though. But for the most part, with that one exception, when he fought against Stipe Miocic, and you would say, okay, who was the superior technical boxer? Without a doubt, you would say Stipe Miocic. Francis Ngannou, when he fought against Stipe Miocic, was going for these like right haymakers. He was going for these large, gigantic swings here. And then Ngannou's coach goes up to say, hey, Ngannou right now, he's less focused on power shots. He's more focused on fighting smart, fighting very technical. And also, he noted here that he's now almost trying for kicks now. And I think aiming for kicks is really good. I don't think Stipe Miocic has fought somebody whose kicking game. It's because in the heavyweight division, you usually don't see that much. You usually don't see heavyweights ever throw kicks. They're very grounded or very stationary when heavyweights fight. And so for Ngannou to go work on, okay, he's working on his kicks. He's working on trying to be more of a technical boxer. Francis Ngannou would do a lot more better in his second turnaround against Stipe Miocic. I really think so. I think the stand-up game, and so Francis Ngannou's cardio has been increasingly getting better, which is something that I can go tell from him and from his training camp. He's no longer he's trying to push away from, hey, I'm the big, strong, scary dude who's going to knock you out in the first round, to, you know what, I'm the big, scary dude who will fight smart, who can fight very technical, and can go on multiple rounds, keeping a consistent pace. That's what I'm seeing from Ngannou. He's taking the next step as a fighter. The only thing left for Ngannou, if he really wants to be the perfect fighter, truly is like a ground game. He needs to work on his ground game, because the reason why Stipe Miocic was able to outlast Ngannou in the first round, which later helped Stipe Miocic last all the other rounds, was of Ngannou's lack of wrestling defense. Yes, Ngannou is stupidly strong. He can outpower people who are trying to take him down. But when you have a champion like Stipe Miocic, or if you were to fight even like Daniel Cormier, here's it. So if you guys haven't seen Derek Lewis versus Daniel Cormier, if the Ngannou that fought against Stipe Miocic were to fight against Daniel Cormier, that would probably be like the exact outcome. Derek Lewis has really poor cardio. He's much more of a heavy hitter. He doesn't throw out them with striking. Daniel Cormier goes for a double leg takedown onto Derek Lewis, starts doing some ground and pounding, and next thing you know, Cormier wins. So for Francis Ngannou, for him to take the next like big step for being, you know what, people want to see me as more than just a power striker. He needs to be able to grapple people. He needs to be able to wrestle. And I think Ngannou right now, is he in his early 30s or mid 20s? He's somewhere in between his early to mid 30s right now. He has all the physical tools. He has all the tools to be the complete fighter and to be the star of the UFC that everyone's been waiting for. But he needs to work on a ground game here, because if it was Ngannou versus Stipe Miocic, I see ring and ring. Bell starts ringing. They start kind of boxing each other. I can see Ngannou. With the way how Ngannou strikes, with the way that Francis Ngannou strikes, he has easy reads. You can kind of tell when he's going to go for like a haymaker or a jab, or he'll try to go exert himself in the offense. It's a lot easier to read Ngannou's striking efficiency and how he strikes. If these two were to fight again, I think Ngannou would go pull away with a couple more like body shots and headshots. I think Ngannou would do a lot more better in the first and second round compared to how he did in the last fights. But then I would see like, okay, Miocic's like, okay, this guy here, he's improved on his striking. He's a lot more faster now. He's much more of a dynamic fighter. I'm gonna go and take him down. And even though Ngannou is incredibly strong, I don't think his takedown defense and his wrestling defense is good enough for himself to handle when Stipe Miocic were to take him down, or if Daniel Cormier were to take him down. In my book, who is the hardest hitting, most strongest, who is the most feared striker in all of UFC for the first two rounds? Without a doubt, Francis Ngannou. And if Ngannou is very close to making the next couple steps into being the best fighter in the heavyweight division. If a training camp goes well for Ngannou, and if he continues to learn how to fight a lot more smarter, how to fight more technical, how to defend himself, how to be more of a counterpuncher, more better than he already is right now, Ngannou will be the heavyweight champion within the next 2 years. That's my prediction. I think Ngannou, if things go well for him in his training camps, he will become the next heavyweight champion for the UFC. You've been listening to the GSMC MMA podcast, coming back right after this short break.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
And welcome back. So we've discussed that UFC will have an event hopefully coming up May 9. And one fighter who's already prepped up for the next UFC event here will be Tony Ferguson. This is coming in from ESPN.com that Tony Ferguson cuts 24 pounds in 1 week despite canceled fights. This is coming in from Mark Raimondi, an ESPN staff writer for ESPN.com. Tony Ferguson will not fight Khabib Nurmagomedov or Justin Gaethje on Saturday night, as was originally planned, but the UFC lightweight star says he did a full weight cut and stepped on a scale Friday morning. Ferguson made championship weight, 155 pounds, and showed the footage on Instagram. On a podcast Friday afternoon, Ferguson told ESPN's Ariel Helwani that he started the week at 179 pounds, but started to cut weight as if the fight was still on, and he hit the mark Friday morning. It wasn't just me, it was for my team, man, and my sponsors, and obviously for my whole family. And just the commitment to myself fall through the weight cut, to me, that says a lot more for my stock. Saying that, you know what, I'm going to make weight. I'm not going to miss weight. I have what it takes mentally to go through this fight camp. It's going to be awesome, dude. It was such a great experience. George Lockhart, one of MMA's top weight cutting gurus, who works with Conor McGregor, among others, said that in general, it is unwise and even dangerous practice. Every time someone cuts, there's usually a huge counter response from the body, a bounce back, you might say, Lockhart said. A lot of fighters gain an excess amount of water weight and have a difficult time getting their hormones back to normal. The only time I want a fighter cutting is when it's absolutely necessary. Weight cutting itself isn't safe. Repeatedly doing it makes it tougher each time. I have no idea how much he cuts or how he does it, so I can't speak specifically on him, but as a rule of thumb, I would say doing an unnecessary cut could make cutting again more difficult later when you do it again. So Ferguson was originally slated to fight UFC lightweight champion Khabib Nurmagomedov for the title in the main event of UFC 249, which is planned for Saturday night. Nurmagomedov got stuck in his native Dagestan due to coronavirus-related travel restrictions, so Justin Gaethje stepped in for an interim title bout with Tony Ferguson on April 6, 3 days later. Though the event was postponed, UFC President Dana White said ESPN executives asked him to stand down. Earlier this week, White said the UFC is targeting a return on May 9 at a location that is yet to be determined. Ferguson vs. Gaethje has been rebooked for the main event, White said. Ferguson said he has yet to sign anything for that date, but he's aware he might have to cut weight again in 3 weeks. He plans on continuing to train like he normally does. I've been doing the exact same blank, Ferguson said. Everybody has been quarantined now, but I'm still living the same life. I'm still doing my thing, which is training and bettering myself every single day. My growth factor is effing huge right now. Pardon my language, literally, I feel great. For me, to make weight and Justin Gaethje not to make weight, that's a chalk line right there. That's a chalk line versus any opponent I have. Any person that would make championship weight today was a smart one. That's going to compete on that card. That's still competing. Ferguson said he shed about 13.4% of his body weight in 4 days. That's an above average amount for a UFC fighter to cut. Although not historically high, the UFC Performance Institute recommends fighters stay within 10% of their contracted weight loss. And doing major weight cuts in relatively close proximity is uncommon and usually not recommended. Paulina Indara, one of Ferguson's nutrition coaches, told ESPN that the 179 pounds was likely a temporary high point following Ferguson enjoying himself after finding out the fight was pushed back. Quickly, Ferguson was back in range of 166 to 168, she said. This is where he will live until the next fight week, who works alongside Michelle Ingalls with Perfecting Athletes, which specializes in combat sports nutrition. And Dara said it was Ferguson's choice to do this weight cut, even though he didn't have to. She and Ingalls told him that the most important thing would be for them to have constant communication. During a regular fight week, they would be with him on site, whatever the event was being held. But Andara and Ingalls are in Florida during the pandemic, and Ferguson is in Costa Mesa, California, which leads to a different time period in the Eastern versus Western time zone. We have a tremendous amount of data on Tony, Andara said. So when we were able to say, "Are you ready? How do you feel?" We went through all the questions we normally would, and then some. We said, "Okay, if this is what you want to do, we'll support you. We just have to keep in really, really close contact. That's okay because he's such a good communicator." Ferguson says Andara and Ingalls were very diligent and clutch. "It's effing crazy, man," Ferguson said, "but I had to trust the process and I did it. I made it difficult for myself, but I'm glad I did it. But then I don't have to because when I don't have to make it difficult for myself, then just watch out." After light dieting and keeping up his heavy training schedule, Ferguson posted on social media that he was at 163 pounds Thursday night. And Dara said he did a workout Thursday night and woke up at 155.5 pounds. Any MMA fighter will tell you when they have a really great workout, they're drenched in sweat, Andara said. So you can see the athlete that trains 1 or 2 hours lose 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 pounds. So if he's staying around 165 or whatever, his body will naturally go up. His weight cut was just he had one great workout and he dropped the weight. There is no concern about Ferguson being able to do the whole thing over again in 3 weeks because he will stay in the mid 160 pound range, Andara said. He's very good at knowing that there's a possibility that he will have to weigh in on May 8th and fight on May 9th. So he's not going to have the fat kid experience that a lot of fighters have after the fight because they're like, "Oh, I fought clearly, I'm not going to fight for several months, and I'm going to eat everything under the sun." That's not the case here. He knows he has to be disciplined, knowing that will keep him on track, so we're not worried about it. He's not worried about it, his coaches aren't worried about it, no one's worried. Ferguson says that he's happy he cut the weight, even if only to give people something to talk about. He said he might live stream an open workout Saturday since there are no fights for people to watch. And Dara said she's hoping Ferguson rests his body a bit, as much as he will allow, but she knows he still plans on training every day. Ferguson told Ariel Helwani that he has a workout scheduled Friday afternoon and then another Saturday, and that's after a 24-pound weight cut just over a few days. From 179 to 155, bro, Ferguson said, I know how to do this, let's effing go, champs only. So Tony Ferguson, man, he's all prepped up and he's all ready to go for his fight against Justin Gaethje here. So this is pretty much kind of polar opposite here for Amanda Nunes. So while Amanda Nunes, who should have been training already for Felicia Spencer this entire time, is like, you know what? I cannot fight against Felicia Spencer. I need time for myself. I need all the time I can to properly train myself to go fight against a top fighter in Felicia Spencer. Which contrasts Tony Ferguson and how he sees his next fight. So I think Ferguson really doesn't care all that much whether it'll be Khabib Nurmagomedov or Justin Gaethje in terms of his training. He wants to be like, you know what? I got a fight coming up. I gotta be prepped up for it though, and I'm gonna do my best for this fight. He is committed to the weight cut. By the way, you know how hard it is to weight cut? So, from my personal experience, I was able, within the span of, within a couple months, I was able to drop down from 252 to 235. And it's not that, within about a month, I was able to drop from 252 to 235. And I was able to drop down a wee bit even lower than that, from 235 to 232. And then I got myself back up to 240 again. Losing weight, man, is very hard. You know how much water you gotta drink, man? Because I can't do it right now because I'm the type of person who prefers gyms. But being able to, you have to drink a whole lot of water, being able to do a bunch of cardio. When I was weight cutting when I was weight cutting before the coronavirus issue became a problem, I had to go to the gym three times a day. I'd go early morning, I'd go in the noon, and then I would finish up my workout late at night, around like 10 p.m. or 11 p.m. So I'd go to the gym. I would always drink over a gallon of water. I'll drink a gallon and a half of water each time I do it. So a gallon and a half of water in the morning, then another gallon and a half pretty much at noontime, and then I would drink almost a gallon during nighttime. I would pretty much essentially kind of kill myself for the weight cut, but I was able to do so, and hopefully I can get my weight cut down again, and hopefully all these fighters get their weights properly done by May 9. So Tony Ferguson, man, he is dedicated to his craft, and I can respect him for that. I can respect him for that. Hopefully, Justin Gaethje can go get his weight cut to be done properly, and we can see an official fight card here, because Amanda Nunes already pulled out of her fight, and it'll be disappointing if Tony Ferguson pulls out of his fights. So coming up right after the break here, let's do something a little bit more fun here as I challenge your overall knowledge of mixed martial arts and the UFC. I'll be back after the short break here, testing your knowledge right here at the GSMC MMA podcast. Coming back after the short break.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
And welcome back. You're listening to the GSMC MMA podcast. I am Arnaud De Leon, and if you're excited for some mixed martial arts coming back soon, well, what do you think about Bellator MMA? So, even though Bellator is not active right now in terms of its sporting events, though, CBS Sports will air Bellator MMA Recharged. Bellator's live schedule might be on pause, but the promotion continues to replay its most historic events and marquee matchups. This coming in from MMAfighting.com. The Viacom-owned promotion on Monday announced a new series, Bellator MMA Recharge, which debuts Saturday on CBS Sports Network and features the re-airing of Bellator 192 and Bellator 194. The show will air at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Veteran referee turned commentator Big John McCarthy will host a show which features on the heavyweight Grand Prix matchups that took place at the pair of events. Bellator 192 took place January 20, 2018 at the Forum in Inglewood, California, and was headlined by a heavyweight clash between Chael Sonnen and Quinton Rampage Jackson. Bellator 194 took place in February 16 the same year and featured a heavyweight clash between Matt Mitrione and Roy Nelson. Future episodes are set to air on Wednesday starting on April 29, 8 p.m. Eastern Time at the CBS Sports Network and is owned by Viacom CBS, which also owns Bellator. And so if you miss your daily dose of mixed martial arts, well, you know what? Bellator is right around the corner, and if you want to see some familiar faces, you know what? Watch the show Saturday, April 25, 8 p.m. Eastern Time on the CBS Sports Network. Once again, it is Bellator Recharged. So let's go test out your overall knowledge of mixed martial arts and the UFC here, as this quiz here is coming in from whatculture.com. So in What Culture, it's an overall, it's both like a pro wrestling site and an MMA site and also like a sports website. If you guys haven't been following whatculture.com, I recommend you do. So some of these questions are kind of outdated and I'll kind of update it for you. And also I'll be taking this quiz alongside with you guys. So hopefully I'm enjoying it, you're enjoying it, we're all enjoying it. And let's test out your and mine overall knowledge. Who holds the record for fastest knockout in UFC history? Is it Jorge Masvidal, Cain Velasquez, Duane Ludwig, or Conor McGregor? No, that's easy. That's Jorge Masvidal. His flying knee against. Okay, so that's. Oh, I don't know the results yet. So I say it's Jorge Masvidal. He knocked out Ben Askren a lot faster than Duane Ludwig did. Yeah, I think so. So which state was UFC 1 held in? UFC 1 was held. They had to work their way up to get to Nevada, so I say Colorado. Which fighter had a fight canceled after slipping on a pipe backstage? Was it Mark Coleman, Pat Miletich, Kevin Randleman, or Tim Sylvia? Had a fight canceled after slipping on a pipe backstage? I don't think it's Mark Coleman. Pat Miletich, for the most part in his early UFC career, had a pretty clean record. Kevin Randleman, maybe. It was either Kevin Randleman or Tim Sylvia. And in this quiz here, they're showing Tim Sylvia, so I guess it has to be Tim as my hint here. Who created the UFC? Was it Ryan Gracie and Art Davie, Campbell McLaren, Dana White, or Lorenzo and Frank Fertitta? So I know the UFC was already picking up some steam before Dana White and the Fertitta brothers had reins of it and tried to push it further into being what it is today. So UFC was already an existing entity before Dana White and the Fertitta brothers. I've never heard of Campbell McLaren, but I do know Art Davie was an instrumental part into the development of UFC. So I pick here Art Davie and Ryan Gracie. And then next question: Who was the first women's fight in UFC history? Was it Alexis Davis versus Sarah Kaufman, Ronda Rousey versus Kat Zingano, Misha Tate versus Julie Kedzie, or Ronda Rousey versus Liz Carmouche? I think Ronda Rousey was the first woman to be signed. I think she's the first to also fight. So it's either Rousey versus Kat or Rousey versus Liz. I think Rousey already picked up some steam within the UFC before she fought against Kat Zingano. So I go pick Liz Camacho. How many days did Anderson Silva's middleweight title reign last? How many days? Was his middleweight title reign last 2,284 days, 1,851 days, 2,457 days, or 2,935? I should know this actually because I took a quiz on how long Anderson Silva's reign was in comparison to everyone else. I say I don't think any fighter has reached the 2,000 mark yet. We have fighters who reached the 1,000 mark yet, but not the 2,000. So I say Anderson Silva's middleweight title reign lasted 1,851 days. Who has the fastest knockouts in UFC history? Who has the most knockdowns in UFC history? Most knockdowns? I have to go for attrition here, so I say... So the options here are Jeremy Stephens, John Jones, Anderson Silva, and Mark Hunt. Who has the most knockdowns in UFC history? Knockdowns? I kind of have to put my money on Jeremy Stephens here just because he's had the most cumulative fights versus everyone else here. Which former champion was UFC President Dana White set to fight in a boxing match? So, who challenged Dana White to a boxing match? Okay, so the options here are Frank Shamrock, Tito Ortiz, Tyron Woodley, or Brock Lesnar. Without doubt, Tito Ortiz, man. Tito Ortiz and Dana White, even till now, are still beefing. Who was the first Ultimate Fighter winner? Was it Diego Sanchez, Forrest Griffin, Stephen Bonner, Ken Flo Florian? The first Ultimate Fighter winner? There were two. That's the thing, though. Forrest Griffin versus Stephen Bonner was the main event. The safe choice here would be Forrest Griffin. Who has the most finishes in UFC history? Most finishes in UFC history. Oh, Donald Cerrone, without doubt. Yeah. Which UFC card had the most knockouts and knockout finishes? Okay, so which UFC card had the most knockout finishes? Is it UFC 199, UFC Fight Night 18, UFC Fight Night 55, or UFC 92? UFC 92, I think, is the answer here. And this is the final one here. How many UFC titles has Conor McGregor won? 2. He has won only 2. And so I got all of them correct, except for 2 here. And the first one was, which fighter had a fight canceled after slipping on a pipe backstage? And Kevin Randleman was the right one, actually. So even though the picture was Tim Sylvia, it was a way of duping me. And Kevin Randleman apparently got injured off slipping on a pipe. So, while warming up backstage, UFC Heavyweight Championship in a Heavyweight Championship fight against Pedro Rizzo at UFC 24, Kevin Randleman slipped and suffered a concussion. The injury forced the main event to be cancelled. So yeah, he was just there prepping up, getting ready. He slipped on something, got a concussion on his way to the octagon. Didn't look good for him. One here that I was very worried about here was who had the fastest knockout, Dwayne Ludwig versus Ben Askren. And the reason why for that is because I think they added a couple more extra seconds after the flying knee to which Jorge Masvidal gave onto Ben Askren. It was like ring a ring, flying knee happens, and then Jorge Masvidal laid out 2 extra punches onto Ben Askren, and the referee had to go take Masvidal out of Ben Askren, which led up to a couple more extra seconds being piled in. So that's why I thought it was Dwayne Ludwig who might chip away with having a shorter knockout versus Jorge Masvidal, but I'm wrong there. Jorge Masvidal has the record for fastest knockout ever. And then a fighter here that has gone past 2,000 days in his title reign was Anderson Silva. Looking back here, Anderson Silva, his reign was 2,457 days as the middleweight champion, defending the belt 10 times. He's defended the belt 10 times successfully, and then he defended it in a failing against Chris Weidman here. But Anderson Silva and Demetrius Johnson, man, it's amazing how far they've gone defending their belts. And other than it could be Nurmagomedov and maybe Amanda Nunes, I don't see any other UFC fighter defending their belts as consistent and as much as those 2 fighters have within their time as UFC champions. And so I hope you guys enjoyed the listen here. As I say, thank you for listening to the GSMC MMA podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'd like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review. That really helps out. Also, if you can please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts MMA podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts podcast network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmc.com. GSMCpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.